Welcome to Friday's Friday Live. Friday Live is a monthly meetup group uh, produced, or I guess hosted by Dulce Engineering and FM BetterForms. So we have a number of our team here for questions and things like that, but we try to get a bunch of different topics. This month's topic is mainly going to be talking about Claris Engage, but not so much. I know there's a lot of meetups, and I know everybody goes to a whole bunch of different meetups because I see all the same faces. I don't really want to sort of talk too much about the whole events. We'll get into that a little bit, but really we're going to talk about our personal experience with building an app that was used throughout the event, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Last month we presented that app, and with this month we'll talk about what we did wrong and what we did right, and hopefully we can all sort of learn from that. We also are we're going to go into the sort of the soft side of things, or little bits of the organization of how when we built this app, and what the mistakes that we made. We'll also talk about all the technical aspects, and I want because there's a lot of technical aspects and we don't really have enough time to do all of them. What I'd like is when we get to that section, just please, by all means, just say, hey, how did you build this, or how did you build that? And we'll give you a link to that in just a second. We usually have our regular swag draw and post-show hangout as well. A couple quick notes. This meeting is recorded. We usually make the recordings available on our YouTube channel. Nelson in our marketing department gets them out in about a week or so. Please ask questions. We want to make this interactive. It's not a presentation as such. It's a hangout more. It's what our real goals are. We'll start off with what's happening in BetterForms, and I'm just going to open up our roadmap here quick and tell you about what some things that are new and some things that are in the pipe. A couple things moved off the list here. We sort of considered done. You can see the done items down below. This link is available from our awesome BetterForms page, and there's a link to that in the help section in the app. The main big ones are BF Proxy, which is a fixed IP egress point. So it allows corporate environments to have a fixed IP. We have a dynamic environment, so all the IPs change amongst our servers. We built that about 6 months ago or so, and that's up and stable and knocked off the list. I'm not sure if you got a chance also to use our new Actions editor. I'll talk a little bit about that when I do a quick demo. But we're going to be moving some of that. There's should be in here somewhere. May not be in here specifically, but we're going to also be making that work on our global actions as well. A few new things in the forefront is our new graphical user interface, or our drag and drop builder. That is probably one of the biggest projects. We have a couple people working on that, myself and Michael primarily, and we're getting a bunch of other infrastructure ready for that, and I'll have a demo on that later on. We also are working on a new app wizard. This is going to be make it a little bit smoother for generating apps. The current wizard's okay, but the UI is 6 years old, so we're going to be freshening that up quite a bit. The other really big thing that we are moving up and we're going to start really pushing forward is components. Components allow a developer to build one small widget, and then by abstracting out some of the keys that go into that widget, you can use that widget all over the place. So for example, in this particular whimsical app, if I built a component that was like this thing here that I'm wiggling, I could now use that and maybe just pass in as a property or a prop. I could pass in the color, and I could pass in the text, and I could pass in maybe an icon or some features. So it's a little bit higher level of building, and it's going to really, really allow developers to build bigger apps and reuse a lot of chunks of stuff. We already have components in the framework, but we haven't surfaced them because the UI is not finalized. The API for the components and how they work is pretty much solid though. A couple other things going on as well. Our AI assistant. I've seen a ton of people build a ton of stuff with that already. There was somebody on the call here. I think it's Carl, actually. He's one of the first people that I onboarded and showed that. And he's built all kinds of things just using the assistant alone. So we want to continue to refine that. We have a new version that will be deployed probably in the next 2 weeks or so. It's just got some different prompting and functions slightly differently, and a couple little bugs that are in the current one will be worked out. There's also some improvements to the coding wizard for JavaScript as well. So what we've done now is the JavaScript one will pass in the data model and the global model, so that basically the data for your page, so that you can say things more like, filter this key by first name, or filter this array by first name rather. So that's pretty exciting. Those are the main things. Continuing some network upgrades as well. Eduardo's in charge of those and continuing to work on that. All right, I'm going to jump back to a few other things that we got coming in the works over the next few months. I just want to mention. Currently, our BF latest, which is it's not our latest, it's our latest software that is released and stable. That doesn't imply that other things are unstable, but it's a little bit more vetted because it's older, is at version 2.0. And we also have a staging test build that the entire community can use as well. It's called BF staging when you deploy an environment. And that is currently at version 2.1. We're going to be bumping that to 2.16, which is a smaller build, but it has a lot of bug fixes, quite a few of them that are in there. You can see the bug fixes from our change log. The goal is to be shifting these things down to make room for version 3. Version 3 is quite a bit different under the hood. There's a lot of new libraries and a lot of stuff, the dependencies and things have been updated and such. So our goal is, and we'll send out emails for these, but our goal is to bump up staging from 2.10 to 2.16. Staging version is 2.10 build will bump into latest, and everything sort of flows down that line. We'll be doing that over the next few months. You'll have an opportunity. We'll send out an email. If you are using specific builds, we'll send out an email to you on how to test things so that we make sure that we don't break anybody's apps. The biggest difference between 2.0 and 2.1 is 2.1 has pretty aggressive caching. It basically has a lot of performance optimizations where it doesn't have to talk to the server as much anymore. As you load a page, the page can be pre-cached, so that means the app loads instantly on the very first load in all the pages. There's no more spinners or things like that. And it can also save data locally. We have had a number of people testing that out, and we've run into some little glitches and things like that, which we're in the process of coding out as well. Version 3, let's talk about that a little bit. Version 3 has quite a bit of changes in here. Fundamentally, it's the same base code, of course, but the main thing is we've reduced the opinion, the styling, if you will, of the app. So BetterForms originally started as had a lot of opinion. This is what the app looks like. But as you know, if you're a FileMaker developer, everybody's apps, there are no two FileMaker apps that are the same. So just like with that same principle, there are no two BetterForms apps that are the same either. And we see things that are totally, totally different. Somebody says, well, I want this app to look like this, and I want this one to have this colors and shading, and I don't want to have these borders or this chrome on the display or anything like that. So we've removed a lot of that opinion between version 1 and version 2. And now version 2 to version 3, we've removed almost all of it. So it has hardly any opinion. That means there's no spacing. You have full control or full fidelity control over everything. We can do that already, but sometimes we had to jump into some CSS. Nested groups is a big one. That allows us to do things like, and I'll show you a little bit later on. I'm just going to kind of casually draw on the screen here. But a nested group allows you to take an object like this, and then I can put another one inside here, and then maybe two more inside here, and then I can split this one up in half, and so on. So that gives us a ton of flexibility in terms of building things. In the past, we had to sort of jump through some hoops by using either like a panel element that supports nesting or tabs, things like that, some different types of interface components or elements that allowed us to nest these groups. So we don't have to do that anymore. Another feature that's coming to version 3 is iterating groups. So that means you can take a group, build something up like a contact card, and then specify what key that's going to iterate, and that'll automatically iterate and repeat that group. So now that you can basically create those cards with the drag and drop interface. This is where this is all going. And you don't have to jump into any HTML anymore for that. So that's gonna be a pretty significant change, these iterating groups. Version 3 is currently about 99% compatible. Well, 1% is really, really big, right? So that's one out of 100 features. And if you're using 30 features, excuse me, in your app, every 3 apps there's a break. So there's a few small things in here that we're just patching up, and we should probably be about 99.5%. The only people that it would affect are people who are using very, very opinionated or edge case apps in BetterForms. There's and they may have to make some small changes. We've already written some code that does the conversions between the old schema and the new schema, so that happens automatically on the fly as soon as you open the page. It's actually in the app right now in our deployed app, but it's not. It's semi-dormant. Performance improvements. We created a bunch of performance improvements for version 3, but we've backported those into 2, so that's where the 2.1 came from. These include things that I mentioned earlier of page caching, faster loading times. The app is a lot more optimistic about the fact that it probably wasn't edited recently, so it downloads stuff and it caches that stuff in the browser. Also with version 3 is some network upgrades. We're working on some of the things that are in the far pipeline is the additional host domains. Right now we have star.fmbetterforms.com, but we have a couple other domains that we've secured that we also want to make available to you so they can kind of fit in. And they'll fit in nicer with your client's apps where you don't have to, it doesn't look so branded, but at the same time, you don't have to go in and do any DNS work with your registrar. Does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff so far? Will I take a breath? All right, perfect. So that being said, I want to give you a quick sneak preview of where drag and drop editor is, and I'd love to hear some of your feedback on some of the UI elements. I think we have Pearson in this call. I'm not sure.
Yep, I'm in here.
Yeah. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to that right now, and let's have a quick look at what that experience is like. I do want you to keep in mind that this interface is not finalized, meaning that there's a lot of components that are sort of just like when you're building anything, you put stuff on the screen and it's not super polished because we don't have a whole bunch of people that are going to be reviewing it every 10 minutes and saying, oh, we have to hide a lot of stuff. So as we develop things, we kind of leave, there's some stuff that's going to left on the screen and so on. But let's jump into something really simple. We'll start with a relatively basic form. So in this case here, I have this pretty straightforward form. Actually, this is one of Pearson's projects. This was his sort of first project playing around with things, but I'm going to use it as an example. He added there's a background starburst type thing with an object and a sidebar. Put some things in the sidebar. Maybe we'll do that. And then some other fields down in here. So the biggest difference between here and the way we currently edit stuff, which is in here, is it's a lot more visual. The interesting thing is, as you become really proficient, you don't mind using this at all. But when you're a beginner, it can be a bit of an obstacle, as we know. So here's the main gist of things. I have maybe I want to add a little bit of a header up here at the top. I have a let me see here. Just a second here. I have a number of different fields, and I'm just going to check something here quick here to make sure that this is the right one. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. And there might be some bugs in here. Michael is constantly working on this. So every time I'm in here, there's something, it's changed a little bit. So we have various elements on the page. You can see here's a text element, another text element, and so on. As I go down a little bit further, I have this label, and then I have 2 fields, but inside those fields, they're wrapped in a group. So you can now group things together. We can group things at one level, but now I can nest these groups, and that's a big difference. If I want to duplicate a group, I can just do this, and maybe I want to change this first name field. Actually, I'm going to add a bit of space below this group here, so we still have full access to our CSS. But since we primarily use Tailwind for building things, we can just say something like margin bottom 4, and now I've given my group a little bit of space in between this one and that one. And if we want to change this label, this will be cleaned up a little bit, but it says first name, and I'm going to call it alternate, or we'll say middle name. And we want to change the field that this is bound to, name, middle. And that basically changes that characteristic for that field. Normally in the past, we'd have to go and edit the JSON for that. Maybe I don't really want this particular one in here, so I can delete that. If we want to build something a little bit more complex, we can still do that. So for example, what I'll do is I'll build just something really quick in the top here. Actually, let me go to a different example to show you what that will look like. New feature here. Let's go to this one here. And I'll show you what. So I have a really simple page here. It basically doesn't really have too much on it, just a header, and I want to put maybe some kind of contact cards in here for contacts. So I would start off with our layouts, and I would find a group, and I'm going to put this group onto the page. Now the group I'm not going to see, so I'm just going to turn on the outline so that I can see there's my group object there. Within the group, I'm probably want to maybe put something like an avatar on the left, and on the right, I want to put maybe some text. Right. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to start again. I'm going to undo, and I'm going to use a different layout object. I'm going to use a group with 2 columns, and I'm going to drag that on. So there we are here. So now I got a group with two items inside. It's sort of pre-done for you. This one, I want to maybe put some kind of an avatar inside, and the other one, I want to put my text in. So I'm going to start on my text side. I can search here for text. And I'll put this in here. You can see there's a bit of this is a bug that just arose the other day, so I apologize about that. Michael's working on fixing it here. Hopefully he was asking us how to reproduce it. And I was like, yeah, I just have to do a demo. That's how I have to reproduce it. That's the easiest way to reproduce bugs. I just want to see if we go back in here. Our goal is to release this for the end of March. Yeah, the end of March is our goal here. So all right. Okay, so I've added a text element. I'm just going to duplicate that element, so I have 2 of them, and we take this text here, and then I can change the name to something like, I'll put my name in here. And let's make this font bold. And let's also make it just a little bit larger. So text XL, something like that. And then we'll put position here, job position. So I'm just going to change this text. We still have full control. It's an HTML element, so you still have full control, and we'll eventually put some UI around this. Full control over that element. It's exactly the same under the hood, right? So we can put something like founder. Oops. Yeah, probably. So I can put something like that. And now I've created that. I don't really like the space. I'm just going to reduce the space in the bottom here so they're a little tighter together. Perfect. All right. I have these 2 containers. Maybe I want it. It's going to be a contact card. So I'm just going to put a bit of background color. So background sky 100, something like that. So now I got this background color on my contact card. Let's see how it looks so far. And I have these 2 items on here. One is big, one is small. Well, I don't really want this one so big. Right now it's using Flex 1, and this one's using Flex 1, which means they're going to fight for space. They're both going to try to be greedy, and they meet in the middle. But I'm going to reduce this one. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to make this width, say something like 20 here. There we go. So now I can put my icon or my avatar in here. So I'm going to find an image tag here, and I'll drag that into here. And I don't really have any image in here. So actually this one's a dynamically bound one. So I'm going to change this. And let's just, actually, let's use our AI assistant and create a single image tag with a round avatar using a real person's face. One of the things we use OpenAI for the API for this, and OpenAI has been not quite round, huh? Nice smile though. And because of that, the OpenAI's, I'm trying to see here why it's there. Um, so we're going to say rounded, round, actually, let's go height 16, width 16, object cover. This just object cover just stops the stretching, and then we'll say rounded. Full. We could have done that with the AI, but I didn't want to wait. Um, there we go. That's good. Save, save. And we probably need our container a little bit wider. You can see that. So I have a fixed width on my container. Let me get rid of that width so that way it doesn't compress it up. And that's kind of the idea for building things. Now, where we're going with this is we want to be able to take this group, and let me actually go onto this parent and put rounded, large, just so that it's got a bit of a shape to it. You can kind of see here. Let me just get rid of this. You can kind of see there's my contact card. Now I could just duplicate my card. And let's also give it some space in the middle. So space, you can see how much fidelity you have. Y3, something like that. And now I've got two cards. But where we're going with these iterative groups is we can take this group now. Actually, sorry, we can take this group here, and the key's not surfaced here, but we'll be able to specify a calculation like model.contacts and a conditional visibility key as well. So you still have those two things, because those are the two things that are typically needed in a group. And then you, oh, some balloons. Then you can go through, and now we can generate all of these contacts, and you have basically a contact card with 100% full flexible control over the UI. Any questions on that so far?
Hey, Dan here. That's the iterator you were talking about, right?
Yeah,
And
correct.
features? Yeah, cool. It's looking good.
Yeah, so that's how we envision it working anyway. You'll be able to probably use that for about 90% of tasks without having to deliberately jump into HTML. So that's the idea. You can build this a lot easier if you're not familiar with things. Some people say, well, we've got to learn Tailwind classes, right? And if you were just dropped, somebody gave you a FileMaker on a thumb drive and said, go to it, you'd have to learn all the script steps. You'll have to learn custom functions. You'll have to learn all the functions and so on as well. Tailwind is really, really easy to use once you understand the basics. It's padding, margin, and alignment. That's it, right? Everything else fits in there. So
I would
that's what that.
add that, Charles, you showed that page previously that I had built the other day. Um, and I really have virtually zero developer experience. The only coding experience I have is just from when I was in school a few years ago. So learning Tailwind, I just go to their website for the docs or for the documentation, and I learn the classes there, and I can implement them from here. And to me, I thought that was like I thought this was a huge step for someone like me who has virtually zero developer experience, and I'm just picking up Tailwind pretty easily. And yeah, I can apply those classes here in in a second.
What I thought was interesting is Pearson comes from a design background, so he uses Figma a lot, which is the dominant UI development tool. And he actually built this page semantically or functionally correct. He created an item around here which has some padding. Let me just get rid of that so you can see the actual. Oh, I got the wrong one here. Let me just check here. So it's got some padding around that page. So you can see that this page normally has some padding, and that's the proper way to do that, so that when you actually have the page in here, all of these elements always line up. And then you don't have to go into this particular, say, this group right here and put some margin on the sides to bring it in from the side. It's better to bring all your classes or all your design to the top, and that applies to the stuff underneath it. So, all right, I'm gonna, if nobody has any other questions, that's where we're.
Charles, I'll ask
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
question. So this matches up to base code version 3, right? You're saying your goal is to get this out in a month, but earlier I thought
Testing.
version 3 was farther away. So are you saying it'll move into staging around that time?
It is. It'll be in an alpha test, a public alpha,
Got it.
and then you'll be able to actually just play around. We'll get some feedback from there, and then we'll have that version of base code available publicly. Right now, it's not, you can't select the code that this is running on currently, if that makes sense. So when we push things down, we basically make room, we make resources in our data centers for this version of code. We could run them all concurrently, but it does consume quite a bit of resources.
Will this be able to do navigation, Charles?
Yeah, so this is the page with navigation turned off, right? If you're using the default navigation. So this is an interesting thing, is BetterForms has built-in sidebar navigation, which is effectively, it's an opinionated slot is really what it is in the app. But what if you want to build an app that has navigation on the top? In fact, BetterForms has navigation across the top. We have horizontal navigation. We don't really, there's a little bit of sub navigation on the side in like a toolbar. So what does that look like? And how does that integrate? And that's kind of a funny one. So if we think of the notion of slots are predefined chunks of code, and we can stick them in at different places. A lot of people say, well, how come you have a page and page body? Because in between the page and the page body is where the slots stick or sit. So on a page like this editor, this thing out here, this is actually, and this, sorry, let me see. This one here is actually a slot, and I think this one actually is as well, a slot. And if you think about this, so there's two manually inserted pieces of code, and they conditionally show up only on certain pages. And that's how that's built. So the inside here won't have navigation directly, in the sense of what you're used to, but when you will be able to interact with the elements in here and navigate to different pages.
Okay.
So you sort of can do that, sort of yes and no. And you can also build your own things, but you don't want to build it and repeat it on every page. That's a FileMaker style thing, right? We build stuff and put some sidebar on every page, right?
Right.
So instead, we really want to use that slot. And we have designs, but we've never implemented them yet, where you can go in and drill into the slots right in here. And then you can modify those as well. So that's what we're thinking along that line.
I guess
Beverly,
we got a sticky header that you're going to show us later.
pardon me?
I guess you'll show us with the sticky header.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think
Okay.
Hassan's going to be presenting that one.
Awesome.
Beverly, you had a question, I think.
Just a comment and didn't get it sneaked in there. You said move the styling to the top, and that's, I just wanted to point out that's the cascading part of the CSS. So that style applies everywhere and flows down to all the other elements.
Exactly. And you can actually still do that. If you were to apply let me see. Yeah, if you were to apply something up here, changing a default text color, that actually applies. That class would flow all the way down into these ones as well currently.
Correct.
The BetterForms, and I mentioned about getting rid of opinion. BetterForms has some opinion. If you've ever looked into your styling section here, and this is a bug. There we go. We found all kinds now. I just have to report make Michael watch the video. But if you look into your styling, you'll see that the H1, H2, they're actually all been defined for you, right? Because you can sort of globally set those up. So they have some opinion. We also have some lower level opinion on the text color. So you have to override that. So if you've ever used some pasted in code, you may find your H tag, if they had a wrapper that said all the text is blue, the H tag inside that code might not have rendered blue. You have to actually put the class in closer to make it more specific. So in that scenario, we want to remove all of that stuff as well. Get rid of all of that opinion because it's just easier to access now, and we'll have more availability to make those changes, if you will. All right. Any other questions about that so far? Okay, I'm going to leave this one here, and we'll jump back to, oops. All right. What I'd like to do is I'd like to hear from some of the people who went to Engage last month, or sorry, this month, earlier this month, we had 3 of our team, Hassan, Andrew, and myself attended Claris Engage in Austin. And we got a great opportunity to meet lots of our community, which was really, really nice to see different people. Unfortunately, I didn't personally get a chance to talk to everybody, but I talked to a number of people, and that was pretty awesome. But I'd like to hear turn the floor over just a little bit to hear a bit about how everybody else found that event in general. Because I know a lot of you were here. I saw Eric. I'm not sure if you're still on the call here, but I saw Eric. We had a chance to chat a little bit, and a few other people as well. But maybe we could hear from a few of them if there are. Beverly, could we start with you, if you don't mind? Put you on the spot. What did you what were your big takeaways? Like what was awesome for you and what was not?
The sessions that were there that I attended were things like the AI and the studio, and then the booths. I not enough time to actually touch all of them as long as I would have liked, but not enough time to communicate person to person on other things.
Yeah. Is that because of the venue, do you feel, or?
The venue in the 2 days instead of 3 that we maybe normally would have, 5 sessions in any given slot was just horrible.
Right. So there's
There was no time to do anything, and meetings when for everything else. And I think I missed the first lunch, and barely got the second one. But the booths were not on one floor, which I think they should have been. And
we still found that we had reasonable traffic to our booth.
yeah.
I'm comparing the traffic to the last Engage that we were at. We had a small kiosk booth, and that was, I would say, the traffic that I got at that little booth. Now it's a little booth. It was comparable, interestingly enough, even though there's half as many people. So
good.
I would roughly say it was better in some aspects. I think I agree with you. I think there's a lot of people who missed. Like, I didn't even get a chance to walk around to see any of the other booths on the other floors.
Yeah.
I walked over to talk to Eric Luce, who gave me a quick talk on auto, and I also talked to Dave Ramsey just briefly, and that was the only other booth I visited. So,
like when they would have a dining area and people would sit in there just to talk, but the booths were around either the outside or kind of in the center of that big eating area, then it was more chance, I think, to go up and spend a little time with the booth than the way this was, where you're different floors. And
Yeah, I think I'm a bit biased because, we we spent a fair bit on the booth. So it's we're we're expecting some ROI on that as a business, of course.
All right.
So I
Yeah,
guess it's maybe for
I've
the
had a booth
vendors.
before, so
All right.
I got you totally.
Uh I see Alex, you were at Claris. I'm not sure if you're free to jump on or not. You might not be.
Are you talking to me, Charles?
Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot, man.
Oh
How did
no.
you, what were your takeaways? Is there anything like really like, oh, this was awesome. I got this one killer tip or?
Um, yeah, I went to a lot of the AI. I was yeah, I mean that was great. I did like the that it was at the Apple campus, and all in one building. Um, you could get to things pretty easy, I thought, and not have to walk a million miles. But yeah, I was nursing a bad knee, but I thought you could get around pretty easy. The only thing I wish I wish everybody, we were closer to the event, but instead of being bussed in. But
Right.
uh, I attended uh, uh, Jake session, and that was great. Just kind of informative on how to get your data out there, like in what you're using.
Hmm.
Yeah. Overall, I thought the sessions were good. I always come away with a little bit of overwhelm, right? Because there's so many different topics and stuff where you get to a point where, oh, what am I, can't focus on
Yeah.
anything, right?
I saw a lot of people make notes, and I think that's really, really useful. Grab those little tidbits. The real killer tips, they just instantly go into your head and you understand it. And it's like, yeah, that's my use case. I want to go do that tonight in the hotel and fix it.
Yeah, I think if you have a
Hmm.
good system of taking some notes, not even during, but even handwritten notes that you can refer to later, in the evening and such, that'll get you to remember, oh yeah, I did that today. And think about it a little deeper, maybe explore it a little more.
Right.
Yeah, I enjoyed the event. And I especially liked hearing uh uh Apple, behind it a little bit. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really important.
So I
But
think I think yeah, I think the Apple campus was kind of interesting. You kind of walking around there and it's got a very Apple feel, sterile, I
yeah,
found, but not unfriendly, just sterile.
yeah,
Um, and there's some really weird things like the very hard to find labels for the washrooms. Yet there's an electrical room that has a big stuck on label. So I noticed that Vince is in the call. I'm not sure if he's free, but I just want to give a quick shout out. Vince won an award this year for I think it was for community contribution. I'm not sure if I got the wording for the award, but congratulations, Vince. It's probably very well deserved, I'm sure. So uh,
Lifetime achievement.
lifetime, that's what it was. Thank you. Right. So I don't think I started early enough to get any one of those, anything like that. So that's pretty awesome. Awesome accomplishment. A few other people were in here. Anybody else? Any other contributions? Actually, Andrew and Hassan, this was your first conference. Andrew, this is your second one. You went to Engage You. What were your thoughts, guys?
It was pretty nice to see people finally in person because like even seeing Andrew, that was my second time ever seeing him, and we've been working together for like quite a while now. Yeah, it was nice to see the
Sure.
community and get to interact with people.
I was surprised how many familiar faces I saw from Engage You come to this one. I guess the this a similar crowd, but there's still a lot of new faces as well. For example, getting to see the Navicu team for the first time was awesome.
Which one you
And
work with quite a bit.
Yes, and Jake from Angel City Data was cool to see, and his presentation was really cool as well.
Jake was going to be on our on Friday Live today, but he messaged saying he's got a bit of a family emergency. He may pop in later on. I don't think he's here now though. So, all right, awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, everybody. Jake was going to be on. Here's Jake here, and but unfortunately, he's not. And I don't want to present his app without him because he knows how it works and stuff. So I think we'll hold off on that, and we'll skip that. But he did a really, really neat presentation called FileMaker Web Intersections, and basically looked at different types of three different technologies. Looked at things like WebDirect, and technically there are four avenues now. There's WebDirect, Clara Studio, custom scratch on the other side of the extreme, custom scratch built apps, and applications like FM BetterForms that sort of sit in the middle there. And he talked about the differences and why you'd use one platform over the other. So that was really interesting. We had I think he had quite a few people, and he had a really neat app that has all kinds of live analytics that are reporting his spouse is having a baby. So he had a little survey on that, which was pretty neat. If you haven't already, just for the nature of, for the sake of what we're going to be presenting next, grab your phones, and if you haven't installed this app, give it a try so you know what we're talking about here when we go through the app. And hopefully I haven't actually tested this QR code, but it should still work. The Visionary app was an app that we built in collaboration with Stephen Dolinsky from FM Forums. And the idea was originally started as a mechanism for booking the Visionary Bar. The Visionary Bar is a free help desk that anybody can go and speak to fairly established FileMaker community developers in a sort of a private setting, and they can ask questions. I'm having a problem with this, or how would I go about doing that? And there's all types of different people, some people from management and high-level consulting companies down to specific types of developers like web developers and so on. So that was pretty neat. So this is the app that we built for that, and we wanted to tell you about our experience with that and share that, because although we build a ton of apps, roughly I would say something like maybe one a week or something like that, like polished high-end app. This was only the second one that we built for this type of use case. And we talked about the first app that we built was our Connect app, which is just a generic demonstration app. We used that as a framework for this one to start off with, and then we modified a whole bunch of bits. And we try to take some of those lessons learned and apply them into here. But this app yielded a lot more tech and a lot more lessons that we sort of pulled out of it there. If you don't have this URL, I can probably post it. Maybe Andrew, if you get a chance, if you could post the install link, maybe in the chat there, and as we go on. So if you haven't already scanned that, give that a quick scan. I'll leave it there for another 20, 30 seconds. And then we'll sort of talk about some of the attributes or the things that we did in here. All right. We broke our lessons learned, if you will, into a couple different categories. And team, just feel free to please do chime in on things. The first thing that I'm not going to do these quite in order, but I'll talk about I'll talk about features first. And the first thing that we really learned, and this is really a project management thing, is to have a clear idea of what the scope of the app is going to do. Originally, it was going to only be used for booking Visionary Bar sessions. And it ended up being a list of all of the sessions and the ability to favorite the sessions and a mapping tool to figure out where the sessions were, because the building was fairly convoluted about where all the rooms were. So because we had a whole bunch of different scope, one of the biggest things I discovered from a sort of a more management position was that we're sort of jumping around a little bit on features and abilities. I'm not sure how you guys felt, Hassan and Andrew, on that when we were building the app. Did you feel like you had very clear scope, or we were
I
kind of
think
winging?
we did have pages defined to each other. Like I was working on a sessions page, for example, and Andrew was working on a different one. But the features that were required for those pages changed a little bit. But I feel like for the most part, like we were kind of on track for what we were gonna do.
We built this in 3 weeks, by the way. It was 3 weeks, and I would say it was kind of part-time. Like we weren't working on it full-time. We had other projects that everybody's working on. So it was like maybe afternoons kind of thing.
I think what I noticed in the development of that scope was, especially because we were on kind of a short time crunch, we would think of some ideas that we knew we wanted, but then later we would realize that those ideas required maybe some other features or maybe some other supporting designs to go along with it. And I think that process of iterative design, but continuing to build and build on itself within a short time span, I think that that kind of hindered us a little bit. But I think it was a great learning experience, and I think if we had more time and maybe like a clearer uh, defined scope from the get-go, I think maybe it would have been a little easier.
Right.
I would
The
say it felt like we did spread our resources very thin to many different features, many different ideas, but never really focused on the main idea, which was the sessions, which people end up using the most. So
But the
if
interesting
we
thing is that wasn't the purpose of the app. So the sessions kind of became the better feature of the app, right? So that sort of evolved in there.
Yeah, it's almost like the identity of the app changed as we kept developing, because we realized maybe or like maybe we could have seen more of that value and focused on those sessions pages if we knew that would be kind of like the selling point or something.
Right.
Well, one of the main reasons was we didn't realize how bad Apple's app was going to be for the sessions. So if we knew how bad that was going to be, then we'd definitely try to focus more on the sessions.
That's a really good point. We sort of Apple was kind or Apple, or I guess it's the Apple, some kind of Apple system that Claris used. And they continued to evolve that. At first, it didn't have any ability to do hardly anything, and they continued to be adding features and updating it. So it was almost a decision like, do we still go head first and add some sessions in there, or are we wasting our time and resources and the 50 hours to add that bit of code in there or whatever it was? Um, the whole app took around 130-ish or so hours. I think there's 174 on our time log, but I think a lot of that other stuff was maybe some other tasks that are related to this, but not building the app. Just to give you some background idea of the effort that was involved. Promotion. So the app was promoted, and I think now the app was promoted as part of a tool for booking, for the visionaries to book their time slots, but also for people to see who's in those time slots. But looking and realizing that the killer feature of the app is actually seeing the sessions and what's on right now and where it is. We could have probably promoted it a lot more. One of the things we were kind of apprehensive about was, if I can go back here, is Apple has, we kept hearing sort of through the meetings and things like that they're very fussy with signage and you can't have signed anywhere else and all these things. Turns out it was pretty relaxed. But you can sort of see, I'm not sure if I have it in this picture. I think it's just one picture. Yeah. Sorry, let me go back. You can sort of see that there's a banner, a freestanding banner. This is just a promotional banner. We have another one of these, and we were going to get the app on the banner with a QR code for people to scan, but we didn't want to kind of make that commitment to getting, ordering this banner and getting it printed and everything and taking it there without knowing that we can actually set it up. Turns out that we could have set it up fine, but that's a hindsight thing. So that's something that was that could have been done. The the ability to, where are we here? Share the app was another big thing too. It's one thing to have advertising for your application, whatever it's doing, and getting your audience to use the app, but the ability to share that, and this is something we don't think about in the FileMaker world, because to share a FileMaker app requires some kind of an install, right? If it's FileMaker Go, you're installing something. And if you're installing something, you're probably doing it for your fleet or something like that, for your own controlled community. Whereas this is not our own community; it's the consumer. So we could have made the app a little bit more viral in terms of sharing. Andrew, you added onto the maybe I should pull it up here. I'll do that in the background here. Andrew added a QR code for the homepage.
Yeah, I threw it on the bottom of the home page to avoid kind of getting or interfering with anything else on the page. But really, what would be ideal is to have that more prominent somewhere, maybe on top, so it's really easy for them to share and spread, make them go more viral.
Right. So that was down here. We just did this, he just dropped it on, copied it from the other page and plopped it in there and deployed it again. We did do some live updates, which was quite handy. One of them was in the car on the way over to Engage. We pulled up BetterForms on the phone because we had made some changes and deployed it from, I think Hassan was driving and I think I did the deployment, or Andrew did I can't even remember now. And that's kind of neat. And that really actually made us realize that I think we should make BetterForms more mobile friendly for those kinds of things when you need to roll back something, especially the deployments, the rollbacks, because you're turning your phone sideways and zooming and stuff like that. And it's not the greatest experience because it wasn't designed for that. And I think that's something that would be kind of useful to do.
Charles, I think a screen share froze.
Oh, did it? Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry, I must have hit the pause button. So here's that QR code at the bottom here. So I think we would have probably put it at the top, like some kind of button or something. I don't know. How would that go, Pearson? Like some kind of share this app or tell a friend, or do you think?
Yeah. To share it, I think maybe somewhere up in the header, kind of beside the sign up, sign in. I don't know. Honestly, I'd probably have to look at some other references to see how other people
Right.
share the app.
I,
Maybe
I
it's like a
would have
banner.
I would have put the typical share icon with a box and the arrow out, but just link to that QR code down below. So it just goes to that.
Right. Yeah, so that's something that we would definitely do. And I think the ability for a public app success comes to how easy you can get it installed or get it onto other people's devices. One of the big things we did is direct to install. So in our first app, we actually put a link to the home page, right? The Connect app, which kind of looks very similar because we built it out of the same sort of frame, if you will. In this app, the QR code goes to the page, but really it shouldn't go to the page because that's not the process that you want. Then they have to electively, install this. This kind of installs as they go along. If they hit play challenge, it's going to say best on mobile, takes them over to mobile, and then this page checks to see what type of device it's on, and then it tells them how to install. Whereas with this link here, we're taking them directly to that install page. And that, in my opinion anyway, I don't know what you guys think, but that seemed to make that workflow a lot easier. So if you're actually building something like this, it's really, really key to start thinking about how these sort of workflows will actually pan out in the real world rather than well, I'm a developer and everybody will do it exactly as I've coded these buttons to do. Collaborative building, app promotion, making it more viral. I think something we could have done a little bit more of. We did a fair bit, but not that much, in all honesty. And I think this goes for any piece of software, is testing. We didn't actually have our own testing person really test the app at all. We just did it ourselves, and quite frankly, Stephen did a lot of the testing and pointed out a lot of the bugs. So That's a big thing. And I think anybody who's normally building an app for a client, you probably do a lot more testing. Internal, man, maybe not so much, right? And the last thing I think we could have probably done differently in the app or added to the app, as Pearson mentioned, these features, is some more type of gamification or something that encourages people to keep going back into the application and getting more value out of it. So that might have been, we didn't actually incorporate push notifications. The framework can do that. And basically the way push notifications work is, let me just see. I gotta sign in here. Let me just log in. All right. And if I go to my account page, did we push notifications visionary bar right here? Okay. Yeah. So when I check this, you'll notice that my browser is now prompting me to say, hey, I'd like this app is requesting push notifications. We say allow. We don't do that right away because people just close it. So you want to kind of tell them ahead of time that that's about to happen. You see that in a lot of mobile devices, a bit of a preamble warning. And that was that would have been a good thing because we could have said, John just booked this session, or more people are interested in this hot topic, or some people maybe while they're in the session, they can say this is really, really good. And then I can bail on one session and jump into another. So that might have been an option there. All right. Any other questions before we jump on to the technicals? Super. All right. We have quite a few different techniques that we used in the app, and I don't think we'll have practically time for maybe all of them, but we can definitely show you some of the code bits and how they work and point you to either examples or create the examples as needed. So what I'll do is have a quick read through these. See if Russell, you had mentioned interested in sticky headers. So maybe I'll flip this over to Hassan if you're good to go. And you can show how that works.
I'll just share my screen right here. Here and preview the page. So there's two types of sticky headers using the visionary bar. One was the scrolling one, which would show like the date at the top. So you see right here, whatever the newest one kind of just takes over. This was one of them. To do this one, it was actually fairly straightforward. All you're doing is just applying a sticky top 0 to the main div body, the one that you want to be sticky at the top. And this one will just take over every time from the next one, as you can see here. So this we have in our examples, and we'll make this go live probably right after this meeting, and you guys can take a look at that. The other sticky header was the scrolling one. This one, it's the same principle almost, but you're just kind of applying and removing classes. So when I get this open right here, I'll showcase this one. Oh. Here. And now this is the scrolling sticky header. So this was also using the visionary bar up. So as you scroll down, you see the header disappeared. But now if I scroll up a certain amount, the header comes back. The reason it doesn't instantly come back when you scroll up is because if you notice on phones, when you scroll all the way down, there's a little bounce up and down, and that causes the header to flash in and out. So I put like a 300 pixel barrier. So if you scroll up like 300 pixels, then it would come up. So this is a pretty useful technique to make it so it wouldn't come up randomly. To do this, it's a similar principle. So on the header class right here in the group, I'm adding this top div class. And all this is something I can target. And when I target it, all I'm doing is I'm adding and removing sticky top 0. This is the exact same thing that was being used for the other header. So these are just classes I'm adding and removing depending on if I scroll up or down. And then scrollable content, that's the target of the whole body that's being scrolled. So this can be changed to a div wherever your body is. And the child inside it is just adding and removing these classes. Right. Was there any questions on this?
Does anybody? I think somebody uses one of these in their apps. Something
I've
like
used
is it?
something like that. I was going to ask if that uses latest version of Tailwinds or when that sticky class
The
came in.
class is Tailwind, yeah, but you still have to, unfortunately, you still have to have a bit of JavaScript too,
Yeah, for
uh,
that one.
to
Yeah.
yeah, for
Yeah,
this.
you don't have to use Tailwind classes here per se. Like I've done this with CSS before as well, where you could just in CSS make something called like sticky header and just give it those in CSS and then apply and remove that class. You can do it that way as well, but it's essentially the same thing.
That's what I was asking is we actually rolled our own, and it's probably because we just had an outdated version of Tailwinds and we hadn't done the work to check compatibility and do the upgrade. We're trying to do like a laser focused feature. Um, but that looked a lot easier.
Most of the code there is really in the JavaScript side, right? This is yeah. Um, I don't even think you could even have you tried like adding making an absolute so it's just permanently stuck there and removing that or
I think in the Visionary Bar app we used Absolute. It
right,
depends on how your page is set up.
right, and where you want the stuff to drop down, right? Like
Yeah. It kind of just depends on how your page is set up and where you want to drop down exactly. And from my opinion, from using this a few times, sticky and top zero seem to be the easiest that would work. Just applying and removing that based on whether you scroll up or down. And all you do is by just adding an event listener for scroll.
No, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. I had a possibly related question to tell me to move on if it's not. That blue header bar there on a mobile device, many apps allow you to just scroll that out of view like automatically, and I've never been able to get that to work on a BetterForms app.
right, yeah. So it depends where the scroll container is. I'm going to draw on Hassan's screen here if I could. Um, if let me just grab a different tool there. If you've set this entire thing to scroll, right? In other words, if we've allowed the body to, right now in this particular app, I think the body has probably overflow
Yeah.
none. So that stops it from scrolling and it also stops it from bouncing. On a informational type web page, like an article, a blog or something like that, when you scroll down, you want it's okay to have this top bar bounce a little bit and show the white space above it. That's a desired feature. But if you have a business app, we'll call it something where it's, you're rendering back and rendering data, almost all of the stuff that we normally build, you generally don't want this to show the white space because that's a janky feeling in a fixed app. Like if I was to scroll down in BetterForms as an app, you'd see that white space in the whole, if you have navigational items in here and if you have a sidebar with navigation in here, they would all be jittering up and down. And that's not really the ideal effect. So really for those kinds of things, what you want is, let me just erase this here. You want just this section, hold on, I'm just drawing here. You want this section here to scroll up and down. And you want this one to not scroll, right? This is not really an official symbol here. I'm just hadn't had time to draw it to scale there. You want that to not scroll and this one to scroll up and down. So in any app, thinking about what scrolls really determines it's kind of tricky. And it's not easy to visually see, but in summary, if this thing is supposed to stay stationary, it's actually part of the page. It's a kind of a pre-done area slot technically, and that's a part of the page. So in your body of your CSS, you want to say overflow none. Overflow none, and that'll stop it from bouncing. And then if you want it to scroll, you can remove that, and then the whole page will scroll. If you want just this section to scroll, which is what I think he has here, then the container that's holding the items to scroll scrolls. You may, in fact, want to have something here that's fixed permanently and doesn't scroll, doesn't disappear. And then in that case, the stuff from here down would scroll. So there's all kinds of variations of how, where the thing where the thing breaks or where the thing scrolls. And the main takeaway is that where you're adding the overflow and saying, no, this is a fixed height and this is going to scroll.
Thanks. And I think we might actually be talking about two slightly different things. As I
Oh,
was
sorry.
referring more, I mean, that's part of it, and that definitely answered half of it. But like the issue for me had been like data entry, like the space available, vertical height available for a drop-down list, for example. Because that top nav bar never scrolls out of view, like many apps you can, if you drag slightly, it will hide temporarily until you scroll back up. It's a little bit like the sticky header, but I think it's sort of built into the mobile browsers.
You want the sticky header effect kind of to happen for the top navigation bar up here. Like
And
this
it's not
blue
only
bar.
that, but also like the URL and all the browser Chrome as well.
Okay.
So
So
that's the part that like you could gain a lot of space for data entry if that can scroll out of view while you're doing data entry portion.
So there's a new API actually that has been released, but I don't think it's in all the browsers, mobile browsers yet. And it's called the full screen. Apple just released it actually in Europe because they had to do something or something like that. And it's called the full screen API basically. And it allows you to actually programmatically set that so you can get rid of that stuff, and it makes it feel like a PWA. Like if you've used the Visionary app and you launch it as a PWA, when it launches, there's no Chrome at all. Getting rid of that stuff is really tricky because browser's customer is not the app that it's displaying, it's the user of the browser, if that makes sense. The customer is not the web client, the web server, it's the user. So that's why things like password hinting, some browsers you can't even turn that off. And because they don't want you to use 1, 2, 3, 4, because if I get hacked, that makes Safari look like a bad thing. I blame Safari. I don't blame Apple, or I don't blame the site. So they kind of give a lot of opinion. Browsers, I found anyway, kind of gives a lot of opinion on how a user should interact with um, input fields and things like that. And mobile is even more so. Like some of the even sometimes specifying number input and things like that doesn't work on every browser.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That definitely answered the question.
All right, actually, I'll jump back to my screen here. So sticky header. A couple of other things we used in the app is app caching, and I'll show you how that sort of works out in the actual app here. Close this. Here. All right. So in this app, when I navigate, the data is instantly there. It's still live, and I'm going to explain why that particular set of pictures only on this page take a while to load, but this page has the images there all the time. We'll take care of both of those. So caching is really, really key to getting some performance out of an app. And that's one of the things that we actually built right into BetterForms. So what is happening here, and we've talked about this technique before, is the hook is fetching this data. And every time I go to this page, it actually is going to the server and loading all the data. But the data is going into the app model, and we're saving it in that app model. So as you navigate from page to page, we already have that data there. When I come back to this page, since the data is here, we don't actually call an on-form request hook, but instead what we do is we have an on-form load hook enabled. And that on-form load runs after the page has started to render. So in other words, the data is already here in this page. Then we call the server and we say, hey, do you have any different data, or give me the latest data, and the server dumps it down. If we wanted to optimize this, if we had another, say, 5,000 users, you don't need to hit, and they're all jumping back and forth at a conference. Let's say it was like some kind of a AWS conference, 10,000 people. They're all jumping back and forth on the app. That would totally stampede the server and overload that. So what we would do in that case is you do a small call, and you'd say, hey, server, this is the timestamp I have. Is there anything new? And you'd just dump the deltas in. So you could do a lot more optimization. This conference, we looked and said, there's only like 600 people. Maybe we got 50 people using the app. That's plenty. We don't need to optimize it anymore. The server's got plenty of power. It's not a big deal. And 99.9% of the apps that you build, that's a really good problem to have. If you ever do have any performance issues, you can contact our team and we can help you out because we've kind of run into all of these little things. But that's basically what's happening here. The other thing I want to show you what's also happening in this app is the header or the navigation changes from the top to the bottom. And that is actually a relatively simple thing. What we have here is we have a slot for the header and a slot for the footer. And there's a conditional visibility that on a small screen, one shows up, and on a big screen, the other one shows up. And that kind of automatically makes it very, very mobile friendly. We did have to increase the space a little bit at the bottom, and that's kind of an iOS thing or a phone thing. Sometimes there's on my phone, there's like a scroll bar that you can scroll between the apps on the very bottom that sits right in here that takes up a bit of space. So you have to sort of test it out, test your app out on a lot of different devices and in different modes on those devices. So you have to test in iOS, you have to test in Android. Few more versions of Android are floating out in the wild, so they're not all the same OS. And in fact, the way the application installs changes depending on the type of version of Android. So that's something to think about in the installation instructions when you're building these PWAs. We had to test light mode, dark mode as well. And I don't think in this particular app, we tested all of those modes as much. And that's something that it's kind of hard to, and probably you will never ever do on most apps until they get out and somebody says, hey, I can't see the screen because everything's dark except for one word. But that does add for a really crummy experience when they got dark mode on their app and they can't see anything. The other thing we did here in the app as well is these images. All of the images are being served out of S3. So if I was to look at the image address, copy image address, and let's go back to tab paste, you can see that you can see it's visionarybar.s3.amazon, blah, blah, blah. And they're saved underneath some kind of UUID. It looks like a FileMaker shaped UUID.png. And then there's a signature on the end. Now, these particular images are signed, so that means you couldn't just download them. I don't know how long this lasts for, but you can set that up to be unrestricted if you wanted to. And what we also had to do, and this is really, really important when you're serving out a lot of images like this, you don't notice it so much on a regular app. Close this. But on this particular app, there's a lot of images and the person's scrolling here. So that's a ton of data. Let me see if I can do this, if I can grab it in time. You might see one pop in. Nah, it's going to be really hard. I'm trying to find one where it hasn't loaded yet. I'm trying to erase it. So we've done a couple things in here. If I inspect this image, we should see this. I thought we had this. I might be wrong. I thought we added lazy loading on here. There's a tag you can add called, I think it's like lazy loading lazy or something like that. And it basically won't load the image until we get close to the image in the browser. And that stops you from hitting the server and spending, if this is a really tall page and each one of these images is not optimized, you could be, just by visiting that page, you could have just, added a gigabyte of download or something like that to this person's browser, right, as it's going through and loading all these images. So that's an important one. Another important one here too, and this is set up in AWS. We don't have a documentation on this, but you can easily Google it, is to, let me see if let me grab this image here for a second. Copy. Let me see if I go to network and refresh. There. Let me see if I can. Yeah, you won't even see the images come in. Let me see just a second here. Okay, so here are all the images here. Okay, these are all these downloads here, and what I'm doing is I'm just going to Chrome Tools and I'm looking at the headers that come with the image. And the main one I'm looking for is cache control. This one here, maximum age, and that's like about a week or something like that. Stuff is cached all over the internet, and in this particular case, there's not a CDN that's sitting in front. There's not like CloudFront that's sitting in front of this bucket. We're pulling the stuff directly out of the bucket. If you were building a really, really high performance app, you'd throw so that you're not pulling data out of your bucket. You'd use something like CloudFront or Cloudflare, and it would be a CDN, and that would basically cache that image for a length of time. But the browser does really good caching as well because they want the browser to be performant. So by setting this cache control here, it's a very simple setting that you do in AWS that makes this image, it makes the browser remember the image. But if we jump over to this tab, these are different images. And let me see if I can get one of those. And you'll notice that these don't load as quickly. Right. The reason for that is because they're not cached the same way. I don't think. Yeah, no cache control header. Right. So that's a mistake on our behalf. We missed that until we got to the event and we said, oh crap, these are taking a split second longer. So it makes the app feel slow, but it's not. It's just that the images aren't being cached in the browser as quickly. So, and that's why you see these ones. This one does have a lazy loading because I can see them coming in a little later on. Let me just check. I should be able to see it. I know I enabled it but I don't see it in here. Anyhow, but that's the difference between these two tabs. So if you've reloaded this, you'll notice the images come in a little bit later and a little bit slower. And mainly because they're not right now, they're not, you see the images there. Now they've come. And that's because they're not being cached locally, which is a big mistake, if you will. So that's a big lesson learned.
Do you set that in your bucket?
Yeah, you do. So let me show you exactly where. I'm going to pause my screen for just a second. So I got to do some stuff that I don't really want to expose. Just a second. And oops. And what I'll do is I'll show you where that is. Just pulling it up here. Bear with me for a sec. All right. S3. Okay. All right. So we jump to our S3 bucket. We have a demo bucket in here, somewhere in here. And this is just test stuff to do. Let's use example bucket here. So in here, in the bucket, and I got to look this up every time, but it's under one of these settings. There's a metadata tag that you set. And let's see if I can find it here. Management access points. It has to do with the bucket itself. But it's not a hard setting to do. It's a metadata, it's a tag. It looks a box that looks kind of like this, and you say add, and then you set the metadata, and which would be cache control, and then you specify a number. So sorry, I can't find it in here, and I don't want to look around too much, but it's basically just a simple setting that you can set for your bucket.
Hey, Charles, I would have thought that since you're generating a new signed URL each time, I would have thought that the cache header wouldn't matter because the browser is seeing it as different each time.
But the browser, yeah, so there's two things going on there. The signed URL is controlling the access to the file, and that access lasts for 1 day, 1 week, up to 1 week, I think it is max, something like that. But that does not affect how the browser actually caches that particular asset. It's slightly different. Those are two different things.
Yeah, but but you are regenerating the signed URL each time the image is requested, right?
Yeah, but I think that he's probably got a long time out on that. So that could be like a week or something. So you could be in the app and have that URL, like take that URL a week later, but it'll
Right.
still won't be saved locally. So you need a combination of the two, right? Technically, you need the signed URL to be long enough that you can load the asset. And as long as you look, like the browser doesn't read what that signature is. It doesn't have any idea of what the expiration of the signage is. It only
Yeah.
knows the expiration of the file.
Yeah, I know. But if the signature is different, it's not going to see it as the same file as before when it had a different.
That's right. But yeah,
That's what
yeah,
I'm
I see what you're saying. Yeah. But that's only when you when you refresh the data. So actually you just discovered or you just pointed out another effective bug in doing this. And what that is what is it? App.visionary. So here's something that's really interesting. So what Jason's saying is like, just to reiterate, make sure that I'm on the same page. He's saying, since I've fetched this page and I probably generated a new freshly signed. I'm not sure how the back end works because we didn't write it,
Yeah,
but
maybe your backend patch it, but
I'm assuming that he's probably just generating a new one, right? That's probably what I would do at first. He's fetching a new URL. That signature is different. So the image effectively to the browser looks like a different image. So it's going to download it regardless. When you first visit the page, it's going to use the old one because remember, this page loads the existing data, then it dumps new data. So in fact, there's a serious bug in the app where we're downloading the image twice unnecessarily. All right. We're downloading the image once with the old one. Well, the very first we'll call it the first image, signed signature one. And if we jump to this tab again, we are fetching signature one again, which is not cached, right? Signature one's not cached. So we start to download it. Then a second later, the hook returns, right? And because we're not caching it, we're downloading a new one because it's a new signature. So we're actually downloading the image twice. So that's a major, major, major faux pas. I never even realized that. That's really interesting. Does that make sense, guys? You know, do you sort of know what I'm saying? What's happening? Visit the page. We download the existing cached URL, but not cached image. So it starts to download. Second later, the hook comes in, new sign, new fresh signature. Different shows up as a different image. Now we can't see the difference because it's the same image, so you can't visually see it. But we're actually downloading the image twice.
I think on a completely public app like this, the solution would be to have an open bucket, like a
Yeah.
public bucket. But
Yeah.
if this was a sensitive files that were restricted to authenticated users, in that case, if you really wanted to improve performance on the repeated file downloads, you could cache the signed URL in your FileMaker database for
Yeah, and
maybe
refresh
3
them
days
once every
or
whatever. Yeah, exactly. There's so many ways of working around that. There's no one size fits all. I think it's always, from an engineering aspect, build it and optimize later is generally that's loosely a better way than trying to make it perfect the first time because then you're going to be running into maybe some bugs where you forgot to refresh the cache in FileMaker. Now you got it cached here, you got it cached there, and then you got your data and so on. But I think if we would have I think the idea of the URL, the one that you just mentioned, is the cache it in FileMaker is probably pretty good, or just the open bucket is even better. Incidentally, he's using Jason Wood's custom function here. If you're not doing that, it's pretty useful, and it creates a signed URL. Like I've seen some blogs that use S3 and it's like majorly complex, way overly complex. This is literally a URL. And then you just do an insert from URL to fetch the container from S3 or a post with that same URL and you set the data up. It's like literally 3 lines in FileMaker. And if you see some framework that's an AWS thing that's more than 3 lines, no comment. So really, really good contribution to the community with that custom function. Anything else you want to see in here specifically? Cache control we talked about, responsive header we talked about, progressive web app we didn't talk about too much. Maybe we can mention that. We've talked about these lots, but each time we make one, there's a little bit more learning because, you know, we've only built maybe I don't know, a few dozen of these apps, and you don't learn all that much in the first one since not until they get really used. But the idea of a progressive web app is fundamentally it's installable. That's the main thing about it. Apple has lost a battle in Europe with with the browser in the sense of Apple only allows Safari browser toolkit, if you will, to be to run web stuff on the phone. And a recent court case where they lost about a week ago or so is like if you use the Chrome browser on your Apple phone, you're actually using Safari's web engine. So it's just a wrapper around it because they're not allowed to. So that became a what do they call it? A monopoly or a court case, and now they have to allow other browser engines to run on the device. So there is some people who have reported in Europe that progressive web apps are, when they're going to launch the app, instead of launching it as a native app or without the Chrome, it's actually opening up. But they think it's just a bug that's been reported when Apple made this change. So that's something to keep an eye out if you are in Europe and building a PWA. What does it take to build a PWA is pretty simple. I'll just show you really quick. This particular app, we did some experimenting here, so it may not be the cleanest one, but I'll show you on the maybe the connector. Actually, all right.
Charles,
Yes.
sorry, can I just pipe in? So I did read an article like you just mentioned about in Europe, and the article I read said that Apple is actually removing the progressive web app capability from Safari because they cannot enable it for competing browsers.
Yeah, I don't know if they're really removing it because apparently there's a support ticket that the Apple posts in some kind of public forum that says that they reported it as a bug, that it's not launching properly. So who knows? Apple they did just mention that in one of the most recent meetups that, or not meetups, what do you call it, keynotes or whatever, that they are throwing a lot more energy into PWAs. It's really a Google thing originally, but it was the idea for the App Store before they realized they could make money off of it, and then they just kind of shut that down and guided everybody to the App Store. But the nice thing about a PWA is, like, we basically had about 100 people use this app out of 600 people. So 1 out of 6, 16% is pretty good for very little promotion. And would that many people have downloaded and installed an app? And you would have had to have the app on Android and iOS, right? So now, and we can push out an update instantly, right? Because PWAs can be what they call side-loaded. You can basically, you install the PWA. As soon as we make a change in BetterForms and deploy, the next time you load that PWA, you'll launch it, it'll flash once, and you'll have the new version. It updates automatically. So that's a big bonus. Basically, what's involved in building a PWA here is make sure I'm on the right one. Login on app load is adding this function, this action. This is a JavaScript action, and we don't have this as a snippet. And I think that might be a good note. Hasn't to add in as a snippet so that I can just drag it on. Into the on upload. Basically, it's you configure a manifest. So you can see here's one for this particular app. You start off with a long name, a short name. This short name is what gets installed and shows up on your desktop. Some icons, you can drill these icons in more finely and have specific icons for specific resolutions. I can't visually see the difference between all of them, but if you're on a Retina screen and all these different screens, Apple's a little bit fussier than Android. Android doesn't matter as much. A start URL, this is the URL that the app will always launch into if it's closed. You may not want it to launch to the home page. So you can specify that, like if I wanted to go to something like well, it wouldn't make sense to have install, but sessions, I would do something along those lines, and it would always launch into sessions when the app is fully closed. The display mode is standalone, means it looks like a regular app. I think there's 3 options here. One of them will look like a web viewer, so you can specify that. And whether it, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Eduardo might know too, he's on the call, whether it toggles the header bar or something like that. Background color, this is just set to white, so you can specify a background color, and you can actually specify a launch image, but that's a little trickier, especially on iOS devices, to specify the image when the app is first loading and firing up. And that's it. That's pretty much all that's required. This is, you can ignore this. This is, I'm taking us another third-party library and making it in line here, so that's not part of it. So that's the gist. Sorry, that's the gist of making this a progressive web app. Once you do that, you can install it, and it looks and feels like a regular app, which is a great option. These can be made to work offline. Our version 2.1 code can fully work offline. One of the things we've added, and you might see this in the UI, is under navigation. Okay, this is not going to let me navigate. I'll go over to here, navigation here. All right. You'll notice that some of these have a little label that says pre-cached. And what this is doing is when BetterForms loads, it loads in stages. There's the base code, or you can call it like the operating system. And then it loads your site, which is all of this stuff that's in here. And then it loads the page. And one of the ways we significantly reduce the load time is by not having it go and fetch all of these 3 different calls one after the other. That's how it originally worked. The new version of code, it goes and fetches, and you'll notice the refresh is almost instant here. It's actually a little slower only because we're fetching something there, I think. Let me just see here. Oh, I hit refresh there. All right, it's, yeah, almost instant. I'm not even sure why there's that loader there. It doesn't need to be there. That might be something else. So what's happening is when you select pre-cache and you turn this on and off, the schema for that particular page comes down in the initial payload. So it comes down with the rest of the site. By doing that, we don't have to go and fetch the page. So when you navigate to that page, the base code looks and says, oh, I already have the data for that page, so I don't need to go to the server for that. If you have on-form request, of course, it'll still always go to the server. So that's what's happening there. So we don't have every page done like that, but some of the pages are pre-cached. And that makes the performance a lot. If you want to make this app work offline, you'd have to pre-cache all of the pages and also gather all of your data and keep it in either local storage or you can't keep it in session storage. You'd have to probably store it in local storage or in IndexedDB, and you can save the data on the device. All of the actions, everything else will run exactly the same. BetterForms takes care of pre-caching or preloading almost all your DOM header libraries. So if you added these, we take care of that already underneath the hood. With some Eduardo's written some pretty clever code in there that caches all of that stuff so that the whole app will effectively run offline. We don't promote it as such, but you can definitely, we have some examples of apps that fully run offline.
So that's sending or saving the form schema. Does that mean if you have an on-form request hook, it
still goes to the server?
Still goes to the server, not the server first, or that process is still the same?
So
like the form schema still passes through the server, but after it loads the local.
Yeah. I'm not sure if Eduardo, are you on the call?
Yep.
Do we still fetch the schema in an on-form request, or are we only sending the form request hook and then merging that in with the schema when it comes back in? Because I know we talked about that. I forget which way we do it. If you know.
I won't know offhand.
We can look that up.
I didn't mean to get too
okay.
detailed.
It's an interesting
we've talked about that in the past, and
right, but it's a really good nuance that because we did talk about that, because we don't need to even fetch the form schema if we have it and you have an on-form request. and that makes it a little slightly quicker. It makes it about 8 milliseconds in the data center because we don't have to fetch it at the form schema out of cache, and then it makes a little bit in your FileMaker server because that extra data does slow FileMaker down because it's chunking through more data in the
Yeah,
hook. So
I can imagine the payload is going to be, like I've got a pretty large editable form, and the
yeah,
payload on that is pretty massive on the first page load.
yeah.
That could
So
reduce
that's
the
an interesting
our
one.
server load a lot.
Are you sending the full schema in the
Not
sorry
on hooks, it's just that first
on the form
page
request?
that, and I haven't done caching, and it's
We have a feature request to remove the form schema on the on form load, sorry, on the on form request on that first initial load as well.
oh,
Uh,
okay,
but
nice.
we don't do it currently, so it still passes through, I
Yeah,
believe. But that is that was a feature request, and then that makes that even lighter, right? Because you're sending out way less stuff.
yeah,
So
exactly. Cool.
what else is interesting? We talked about lazy load, responsive. Actually, Andrew, you want to talk about the modals that you used in this app? They're kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't mind bringing that up. Um, we're not using the traditional show card modals because that isn't totally responsive, as in if you're changing screen sizes in the middle, it's not as clean as it should be. So we tried a different method for this app using just an HTML built modal that kind of when you click on, for example, let's use Charles as an example. This pops up, and this isn't using a card modal. This is just HTML with a mask behind it, as well as the modal itself in the middle. And the benefit of doing it this way is it's a bit more responsive. I'm going to pull up my responsive tool, and you'll see we have more control over kind of the design of the modal as we get smaller and smaller, just so it fits on multiple devices. And it's something that we're still experimenting with. It's not perfect because we kind of want to get everything correct. For example, clicking outside the mask needs to feel really smooth when you're on a small or big device, or you have the X on a large device. We have kind of different logic for how they can click outside of the device. As well, the scrolling feels a bit weird as well. It's something that is a lot cleaner than the card modal for sure, but still something we want to refine. And I think it looks pretty nice. We use this modal in a few different spots, one for the visionary bar and the other for the sessions themselves. When you come here, this is using the same modal design. And once we get one really refined example, I think we can share that. I
Hey,
believe,
Andrew. Yeah, sorry,
yep,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Can you show how you can drill in from like the visionary bar? If you look at a time slot, I think you can see like sessions and then people and stuff. So you can sort of drill through some of the data as well, right? I think.
Right. So from, let's say you were on the visionaries and you found someone who was presenting, for example, Alexis. Yeah, we can also drill in here. You have sessions down here. If they want to find out, oh, what session is going on here, you can click that and it kind of scrolls to that particular session, which is kind of nice. The other way to do this is if you were on a particular session and open up this
Oh,
modal, you
that's
can
what
also
it is.
click on this person and this person's modal will show up as well. So there's kind of two methods of drilling into data. One would be to navigate from one page to another and then scroll to that particular session. The reason we did it that way is to have it in line with the way we share sessions, because when we share a session, you'll see if I get to a smaller screen, the share button does show up. And the way we do the share is we give them a link with a query, and that query gets fetched on form load, and then we scroll to the particular element with that ID. So that's why we did it that way for the visionary side. When you click on a session, let's try Angelo's here. He had a session on lunch, so scrolls to lunch one. But
So he's got
that's the
some.
reason why we have a kind of difference between the visionary side and then the session side on when you drill into data and what kind of shows up that way.
Yeah, when you go, can you go back to the where there was some broken images there? I just want to mention that. So this is something that can be handled because sometimes images break, right? And that happens all the time if you got, 1,000 pictures. There's a good chance that one of them's not working. So the browser kind of shows a broken image there. And you can actually, we didn't do that in this app, but you can add some code to handle that. And we actually do that in the editor. You'll see it says page image not preview not available or something like that. And what's happening is there's no image there.
I
And we
think we
add an
do it
error
for,
tag.
I think we do it for this actually.
Oh yeah,
If
actually
they
you're
don't
right. I
if they don't
think
have
there
an
is
image
one.
here, we throw in a kind of a placeholder image.
Right. But that's not just if there's no data. That's if the image is bad too, if it throws an error.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
So you can have an on-air key that goes with your image tag, and then you can run a named action, or you can change. We usually don't do that. You just run change the data, and then you change the source and you point it to your backup image. So it's something like on air this source equals, and then the URL to your placeholder image.
And your placeholder can be something that's cached, so you're not really
Mhm.
fetching
Yeah.
all the time for it.
But yeah, that's it on the modals. I think there is a kind of a newer method for popovers that HTML introduced recently, which is like the popover tag. Uh, we might do some experimenting with that, and if it gets
Yeah,
suitable,
we should explore that because that's
yeah.
quite often like CSS, technically we're at HTML5 and CSS3, I think, pseudo official. HTML was introduced in 91, something like that, maybe earlier. CSS is 93, I think. I've got some wrong numbers. You can look back at one of our presentations from a few years ago. We talk about all the history. But CSS changes all the time. There's constantly new, and JavaScript too, constantly new things that like RFCs or requests for changes that go into the language, and constant changes that go into the browsers, and they have a whole roadmap of how they take on these features. I would say most of the time you don't have to worry about it, but sometimes there's some really good ones. Like um, there's a what is it called? Not the null coalescing, but it's a chained options chaining ability. We talked about this in one of the Friday lives a while ago. And it basically gives you this ability to just add a question mark in between if I got company dot addresses dot address dot postal code, and I don't have address key there as an object because my object is malformed, I can add this question mark in there. And that gives a ton of ability. So they are adding some really, really good features and optimizations. Constantly, it's a contest between all of the browsers to make sure that they're performed. Because if you're using Chrome and that's always faster than Safari, you're going to always use Chrome because your just stuff just works better because it's quicker. So they self-compete, and that's really, really good for us. I think we covered actually quite a few things. I don't know, is there anything we missed? I didn't really talk about this get as CSS. I know we do use that. I think we use that in the descriptions for the people. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
anybody's interested in that.
you have an
I'm
emoji in
guessing you've
your
talked about it before,
bio.
but I'm curious about the image upload too. Sounds like that's
Oh, okay,
the
yeah.
term I've
So
used.
yeah, Andrew, was it you or Hassan who added the image upload?
I added the image upload. We took a pretty interesting method for the image upload. Let me share my screen and show that for a
Yeah,
second.
let me jump off here. Sorry.
I'm gonna log in. We have some OAuth stuff which didn't really touch, but we
Oh
think
yeah,
OAuth is a lot easier to use than traditional sign up methods as for this particular app. But when I sign in and I come here, we have a little uploading section for the profile picture. Generally we uh use API for these uploads. So you hit upload, you can upload any image. Let me go to an image. Let's go to test files and let's use a picture of an apple. That's gonna run a upload to S3 and profile pictures using the API dashboard. However, for this particular app, we were having issues connecting to Steven's bucket for S3. So we're actually using the BF proxy for this one and then uploading that into a container and then pushing the container into the S3 bucket. Not the most efficient way to do things, but in general, we're using API and the traditional S3 uploading mechanisms. But in this particular case, we are using the BF file proxy. If you're familiar with that, something we introduced recently and I think introduced in a previous Friday Live. It's a way we can upload images from the front end into your FileMaker containers using BF proxy. So a bit of a combination of techniques here. One using the file proxy, the other one using the S3 upload from FileMaker.
Steven had originally all the images in FileMaker containers, so he added a script that pushes all of those into S3 using that custom function, and it basically iterates and does a curl call to S3 and posts the images. The BF proxy is just a temporary holding store. Originally, years ago, we used something like was it file.io or something like these kinds of services just to hold the image for a split second while we grabbed it from FileMaker. So FileMaker we don't have to send it all in the hook. And the file proxy does exactly that. It has a 24-hour expiration on a bucket, and it returns a URL to the app, and that signed URL goes into your system to fetch the asset.
So the proxy is an S3 bucket, temporary S3 bucket, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. So that's
Right.
different than the BF proxy you mentioned earlier, then.
Yes, that one there. Sorry, this is a BF file proxy. That one's just
got it.
that one. We should call it a server proxy. And in fact, we'll change the name of that right now to BF server proxy. So that one's a proxy that just sits in front of your server that gives a common egress from our data centers into your system through your firewall. But this one here, it just shuffles the file for a split second until you can insert URL. And we set the expiration on that for 24 hours because that's enough time that you can respond to something that, maybe your server crashed or something and there's an important file there, you can fetch it, but at the same time, it clears the bucket out. So. All right. And I think that concludes almost all of these items. There was one feature that isn't here. We didn't talk about this graphic. It's not really a this is not really a technique, but it was super handy. And what it did is on a given session, now this is not going to be in here anymore, but there was an image here that would show something like the building had this semicircular shape. So there was an image that was sitting in here that would show the building, and then Pearson had created these little images that were sort of filled, and it would say that's where this is on the 4th floor, and it's in this corner. And that was really, I found it. Some people said it was hard to navigate. I thought it was really easy because the halls were curved, so you could tell which your orientation was. And there's also elevators in the middle here. But I found that really, really, really handy for just figuring out where things are, personally. The other thing that people did talk about here is this guy here, which is not a true representation of how many people are going to that session. But if you compare this 21 interested, so that means 21 people use this app and bookmark this as a favorite session. So that's pretty good. It's a keynote, so I kind of expect them to all do that. But if I do something like, nobody did this thing here. I think let me find something that's interesting here. 12 here. So 12 people out of 10%, 12% of the users bookmark Chris's AI session. And that gave some good comparison if you wanted to get an idea of, 3 only. Okay, this one didn't fly so interesting. It's a lunch session, vendor session, so that's probably why, and so on. So that was I think that was kind of helpful. It would have been neat to say this is I think we had originally had a little flag in there and figure out that the hottest one for that particular time and say this is the most interesting session according to everybody else, because a lot of people have no idea what to go to. So did we talk about this at all too? That's nothing too exciting. That's just running a hook. And basically the hook is saying that this particular ID is checked or this is unchecked, and save that in the server. Not super interesting there. I think that's about it then. Does anybody have any other questions and anything here so far?
No questions, but it looks pretty awesome. Yeah, good job on that.
Oh, thank you. It was quick. It was really quick. And I think, I don't know, doing it again, we probably changed a few things, but.
Looks like you did. I would say seeing the visionary out from prior years, like this seemed the most useful overall. at glance. Like I didn't use it, but that's what I think.
I got imposter syndrome. I got a confession. I'm not certified. There we go. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll carry on here. If you don't have any other questions, we're gonna still hang out. Hang out afterwards. Every week we have a draw. We've updated this list, and check this out, Andrew. Look at that. Huh? Nice.
That's really cool.
Okay.
No
Yeah.
wonder.
I did it with a test picture, like that, my profile picture on there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get rid of that. I look like a knob spinning around. So that was pretty funny. Let me just share computer sound. All right. Basically, if you won something or we just saw you last week, maybe it's up to you, but you can maybe give somebody else a chance. All right. And if you're not here, then you don't. Then we spin again and we remove your name from the list. All right. Dan, are you in the call?
I don't think I saw Dan join the
All
call
right,
today.
going once, going twice, no Dan. All right, let's do it again. Christian. Any Christians in the crowd? No? Okay. All right, we'll go again. It's amazing statistically how often we have to spin multiple times, and you wouldn't think so. All right, Stuart, there you go, man. Right on. I think you're in the call. You just mentioned something.
Yeah, just give it to somebody else. I won the previous time, but I'm
What'd
still
you get?
waiting for my. I never got my stuff, so
Yeah, we're slow on the shipping.
that's okay.
You'll probably see me before we get it shipped. I got a whole bunch of items, and
Yeah, so spin it
we have a
again.
person who
Give it to
does the
somebody else.
fulfillment who's not really showing up. All right.
Spin for somebody else.
Okay. I didn't remove you, but I should have, I guess.
Yeah, it'd be funny if it came to me again.
Eric, we gave you this is really bad. We gave you a t-shirt and a water bottle when you were at the show, right? Did we hook you up with those? That's all we have. Unless you want some stickers, I can send you some stickers too. Here, we'll go one more time because I just saw you last week. There we go. That's a new one. Antoine, is he in the call? This is brutal. That's so hard. Okay, let's try. You wouldn't have thought so, right? Like there's like
Take our stuff already.
The
Come on,
names of the
guys.
people in the call.
Yeah, right. Patrick, you here?
I see a Patrick in the call.
Here.
All right, Patrick says he's here. Okay, great. So we got one. Where are you in here? Patrick, if you could direct message somebody, one of our team or me, that would be good. And we'll get Madalena will get your information and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. I am going to, we're going to stop our recording. Guys, thank you very much for coming out. I hope some of the stuff that we did today is of use. If you do have any questions about any of these techniques and stuff that we've used, by all means, reach out because we love to share them. We have some examples that we've made, but we didn't make examples of everything because some of the stuff you just can't necessarily make an example of it. That wouldn't make any sense. But we're happy to help you with support and finding in dialing that in for your particular use case. So thanks, and we'll see you next month. I think we have a guest on for next month, but I'm not 100% certain. So we'll let you know about a week out.